This is Retonia Brashear, and welcome to Race Talks with Retonia. Today is going to be exciting. I have a guest with me, a special guest, Heather Whitsitt, and we will be back in a minute.
Oh, say, can you see? That's what they want us to believe in so blindly. But we got to take a stance and start talking about the truth and the facts. So, let's chat. Race Talks with Retonia. Race Talks with Retonia. Yeah, Race Talks with Retonia.
It's Retonia, and I want to introduce a very dear friend of mine, Heather Whitsitt. How are you doing today, Heather?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. So today our subject is about allies and people that stand in solidarity with us in this journey of talking about racism and dismantling white supremacy in our country. And I think it's so very, very important for us to have people that stand beside us and stand with us through this journey. And so Heather is one of my dear friends who has taken on this quest, and I am very grateful that she is in my life. We've known each other for how long, Heather?
Ooh, 17 years?
So when she was a baby,
I was little.
because she's like only 19.
Yeah. I was, like, not even born.
Not even born. She's like 16 to 19 years old. So anyway, so I just want to get in very quickly to some conversation, and we're going to be talking, and I wanted to ask Heather some questions about her journey. So Heather, how and when did you begin your journey on social justice and racial justice? When did you start this journey?
I think for me it's probably been something lifelong. I grew up in a very white dominant culture. Family, friends, town, church, everything was very much the white dominant culture.
Right.
And so growing up in that, I think I learned immediately, was taught racism is bad, racism equals bad, and that as a good American citizen, all men were created equal. Like these were things that I thought were true. But then on the other hand, I grew up thinking that my culture and everything within my culture, everything I thought, every part of our lifestyle was normal.
Yes.
And so because that was normal, everything that fell outside of that was abnormal or was other. And that wasn't something that was taught to me in an overt kind of way.
Just implied.
That was just an implied, that was the accepted, you're the norm.
Right.
And so I remember being really young and reading books that were outside of my curriculum, and like really young, like 9, 10, and thinking, why is that not being taught? And I think clearly didn't have the understanding of why that wasn't being taught, but I knew that there was a disparity and I couldn't put my finger on it. So that kind of started young. And then as I grew up, I think, honestly, I began to use my perspective in thinking about racism. And so that meant that I wasn't racist, but racists were this other group of people who were bad. So good people couldn't be racist because we thought everyone was equal. But that the racists were these other bad people. So I separated it from myself. And there were probably 3 things that really started me on into the journey. And the first thing was my husband and I moving into a neighborhood that was predominantly Hispanic and Black. And really seeing the dynamics of power and how that played, and how amongst my neighbors, how seeing structures of power working against them and not me. And I think that really started a shift, and it was subtle, and there was a lot of trying to justify and rationally see it through my own lens.
Which is normal.
So that kind of started something there. And then a silly thing is, it's really dumb, but it's part of the journey, is I changed my hair color. And this was 7 years ago, and you couldn't be a professional in a Midwest city who had pink or purple hair. And what I thought was really interesting was that not that I was just like some different like wacko girl, but that people felt like they had the right to enter my space. So they felt like they had the right to ask me questions about the thing that made me different. They felt like they had the right to come into my space, to touch my hair, to ask me really, really inappropriate questions about the thing that made me different.
Right.
And I remember literally, I was walking through the mall, had someone ask me a very inappropriate question, and I thought, this is something I can change. What if it weren't something that I could change?
Yes.
What if this isn't inherently who I am?
Right. Right.
But what if it was part of me that I couldn't change, that I had no choice over?
That's right.
And so it seems silly, but it was a shift.
That's so important.
It was a shift in my thinking. And then I think the other things were really friends trusting me enough to talk to me about not just overt racism that happened, because I believe that.
Right.
You know what I mean? But microaggressions, and really teaching me and helping me understand what that meant and how those little things add up to something that's oppressive.
Absolutely.
So those little things kind of started to build up, and that's kind of when I started really digging in and really kind of switching my perspectives on a lot of things.
That's really good. So tell me, when you start digging in, and this is not a question that I had down there for you, but when you start digging in, what resources did you start going to? Like, what did you start reading, watching, listening to? How did that shift occur?
I think I'm a very curious person, and so I would pay attention if I was watching something or listening to something, and and even whether it was in a white space, like whatever it was in, if I heard something and I thought I need to know more about that, I started making lists.
Right.
So in a roundabout way, I found things like Be the Bridge. I found people like Brian Stevenson and Tani's Coates, and just literally going through it. It's very systematic for me. I make a list and I start going through it.
And I'm that way with all your friends, because I make a list and then I start checking that list off.
Yeah.
I totally get I totally get that. Okay, so why did you feel it was important, and you kind of already talked about it, to educate yourself in this area? Why did you feel personally that you needed to start making a shift and begin the education?
Again, I'm super curious, but also there was a part of me that was uncomfortable, and that I could feel defensiveness when someone would say something that wasn't gentle. Okay. And so I really began to question why I was feeling defensive.
That's so insightful.
And that was slow, like that, because you want to be right. There's a part of my culture that wants to be right about everything.
It's called the white culture.
It is.
Yeah,
it's pretty much the basis of
that's
my culture.
Right.
And I'm a person who doesn't like to speak about something unless I know about something. And so I didn't want to speak to anything that I was feeling defensive about, or that I was feeling uncomfortable about. So that's when I really started digging in. And when I started digging in, I realized that by not educating myself, people say, well, you're being divisive by doing all of this, and you're stirring the pot by doing all of this, and keep your head above the fray by doing, But I realized that by not educating myself, I was being divisive.
Absolutely.
Because I wasn't understanding, and I didn't want to understand. And so when I realized that I was actually hurting a community of people that I love, that I considered dear and close friends, that's where the education process started. And then on the flip side of that, I think Jesus' heart was so for reconciliation. I don't think that you can read anything about him where he wasn't for healing, and where he wasn't for restoration, where he wasn't for justice. And so I think my faith doesn't let me ignore it.
Yeah, that's really good, because some people's faith has let them ignore it. And that's because they haven't dig deep enough yet. They haven't. I don't think they've asked the right questions. And I don't think that they've turned it into a personal thing, right? Yeah. It is more, this is out there. And you talked about earlier, the good and bad binary. And so, and that's one of the things that's very insidious about white supremacy, is that it has set it up that way. So people go, okay, so if you think that racism is this thing over here, and you are not those things on a regular, normal basis, then you're not racist, right?
Well, and I thought speaking out against racism meant somebody tells something inappropriate, and you say that's not cool.
Yeah, stop that.
But I didn't recognize my role in implicit bias. Like I didn't really recognize my role.
That's right, and that's so important. So how has friends and family react on your decision to walk in solidarity and to combat social and racial justice?
I think it's hard for white people. I do, and I think it's hard for a multitude of reasons. But in my personal experience, I think it's hard because we truly want to believe that civil rights solved the racism problem. And I think that, like, truly, when you talk to people, like, they truly want to believe that that solved it, and so that we don't have to think about it anymore. So there's pushback there, kind of in those ways, but I also think that my close circle of friends, we've all kind of grown up in this together. So I feel like I don't have a lot of people who really condemn particularly what I'm doing in my close circle, just because I feel like we can talk about it and we've all like, oh, you're thinking this, okay, I've been thinking this too, and comparing notes essentially. But there have definitely been people who've had to take a back seat, and I don't think that that's to say that there can't be change or that there won't be change, but I think that sometimes you have to set up those boundaries. And gosh, I really, like, I hope that once this gets down in you and you can't not see it anymore, you become really passionate and really angry. And this is like white person perspective here, so like I'm just so you become really angry. And I think it's really been difficult for me to remember that grace was given to me. And it wasn't soft, easy, gentle grace, but it was a grace that pushed me into it.
That's so good.
You know what I mean? And so I want to make sure that that I don't just cut people off because I'm angry at you. You don't get it. It's hard when people don't get it, because this is real life on the line. This isn't like a theory of, you know, this is real life. These are real decisions that are being made. These are real people we're talking about that you and I love. So it's hard when you don't get it. So, but just remembering not to cut that off and to extend grace when I see an opening.
And that's so true. I know for me personally, this has been a different journey. When you open up and you look and you go, okay, this is what God is showing me. This is what I've experienced. I'm going to start talking about that. And especially when you've been in a group where you've cultivated this love relationship with Jesus, and then you begin to speak about it, and that's not what you see. That's not your response. So it is very difficult sometimes to kind of balance that out and figure it out. And, you know I'm still on that journey of figuring who to bring close and who to push away. And I've had to do that. I've had to, for my own self-care, as a black woman, for my own self-care, I've had to go, I love you, but I can't draw you close anymore because I'm choosing to pursue this, and I'm pursuing it with all my heart, So yeah, so I totally get it, totally understand.
Not everybody was a disciple of Jesus.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so how has your perspective changed since you began this journey? So I want you to think about from the day you started to where you are now. Can you just give me a couple things that have really, truly, you've done 180 degree?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing for me was making it personal. So it was really, really hard to sit in that discomfort with the fact that personally,
because you're a good girl,
as a good person, as a quiet person, as a person who doesn't like to ruffle feathers, but who has her own opinion. You know, I have my own opinion, but I'm definitely not the loud, overt kind of person. And
like me.
Thank you. And I consider myself pretty sensitive to things going on around me. I always feel like I have kind of a handle on what's going on around me, and how people are feeling, and the fact that I missed such a huge thing, and the fact that not only did I just miss it, like as far as activism goes, but as far as realizing that just being a white person in this world, inherently uphold the ideals of white supremacy
without even trying,
without even knowing. And that to me was this. It was such a like a painful struggle. Right. And I think that's a lot of it. I think even going back, kind of talking about people not really accepting that you're speaking out about it. I think there's a lot of shame. And there's a lot of guilt that you have to be okay with sitting in for a minute.
Absolutely.
And you have to be okay with shutting your mouth and sitting in discomfort. And just you have letting go. You have to let go. You can't be in control of it because it's not.
You just can't.
You just can't. So I think that was really hard to sit with that.
Right. Yeah, that is so good. So good. Totally understand. All right. So my last question is, what activities are you today a part of, and what are you doing to use your privilege to change things?
I think for me, again with my lists. I know.
I love the list.
But it's three things really that, like, especially over the past 2 years, I've kind of like, you think, oh my God, there's so much work to be done, and the fact that people of color have been doing this whole time, and I have been so lazy and not educated, like it just gets deep. You can dig yourself into like an oh my God.
I'm just gonna go to bed. I'm just gonna go to bed.
Let's forget about it.
Right. I understand. Totally understand.
But number one was definitely education. And sitting in spaces where I allowed people of color to talk and me not say a word. And so things like Be the Bridge to where like it's a constant commitment to learning. And that's one thing I had to learn was I can't just get knowledge in a day. Like this wasn't created in a month. This wasn't created in 6 months. This is something that has, since the inception of our country, this has been something that's built. So I can't expect to dismantle it in a month, in reading a few articles.
We know what to do.
Why did no one else do this before?
Oh my God, I'm here to say today,
Really learning how to really educate and understanding that it's a lifelong process. This is going to take my life.
Absolutely.
So committing to that, I think the second thing was paying attention. Paying attention specifically when it comes to politics. I hate politics. I hate it. Do you need it? Okay, sorry.
My bad, I didn't mean to scare you.
It's okay.
Keep going.
So specifically when it comes to politics, I think I hate politics. It's not something I've ever been like super interested in. But when you look at it and see from a national to a very local level how involved you have to be to make civic change and how important it is to have everybody's voice at the table. So I've voted more than I've ever voted before in my life. I've written more letters, I've made more phone calls,
signed more petitions,
showed up for more rallies. I've got more condescending letters from my senators than ever before. So that's kind of that civic action part of it. And then I think finally, because of the platform that I've kind of been giving, is really focusing on how I can amplify the voices of particularly women of color. I think that's something that's really something I can do, something that falls in line with what I do and what makes sense for what I do, but really can have an impact both, and not just amplifying the voices of women, but looking at where my finances are going, who I'm supporting financially, and so those are kind of the three things that I've broken it down.
That is so important, and I appreciate that. I know a lot of times when I have talked with friends and family or just people, constituents or whatever about racism, and you know they get, well, what can you do? What can you do? You know, and one of the things I think that Heather has explained so brilliantly today is that first of all you have to become aware of yourself, and then you have to go and educate yourself, and then you have to say, what can I do with the tools that God has given me to implement, to walk in solidarity and to move and to realize that this is not going to change tomorrow, and that I may live my whole life working at this, but I'm okay with that. And then that to me gives me hope, because it says we're going to do this together. We're going to walk together. And so I really appreciate our time. I really appreciate what you mean to me. Because sometimes when I get really frustrated, I may text you or say, get on Facebook and look at this right now. She goes, oh, Mom, I don't look at Facebook. I don't like it. I said, you need to do it anyway. But anyway, so I'm very grateful of our journey together. And what's hopeful is because you're a generation younger than me. And so it's like you can carry this on. Right. So like I'm 60 and you're 22. So you can carry this on. You can be a voice that continues. And so I really appreciate that. So thank you so much. And this has been Race Talks with Retonia. Check us out next time.